Welcome to Beyond the Portrait. Hello, hello. Welcome to Beyond the Portrait's holiday special. I am your host, Brittany Ambridge. Initially, I had another idea in mind for today's episode. That was an expansion of a concept, the sacred pause, and I mentioned that in our last episode with Yolanda Chitohwa. It's been on my mind as of late, as well as the descent into winter. Winter, categorically speaking, has been a season that I've always wanted to rush through as quickly as possible. It's cold, it's dark, it's not my favorite. And yet, this year, I have really come to appreciate the beauty that can be found in winter. Beauty in decay, beauty in slowness, beauty in rest. And rather than push through and speak on something I was still pondering, the irony which was not lost on me, by the way, I assure you, I decided to wait until after the holiday break to record that particular episode, so that I am fully embracing the lesson that the pause and slowing down and going inward can be. How very unlike me. My therapist was going to be very, very proud. There's a book, Wintering, by Catherine May, that I will be reading over the break, and I'll link it in the show notes. So if you'd like to read along with me, you'll get a head start on what we'll be starting in 2025. As a heads up, today's episode will be our last for 2024. This podcast officially launched in August of this year, and what a ride it's been. If you've been with us from the beginning, big cheers to you and thank you for your support. And if you've joined us just now along the way, I hope you'll enjoy today's episode as we will be hearing from each of our guests a pearl of wisdom to take with you into the new year. Also, I'd like to make a request that if there's an episode that you like, to share it with someone that you think might enjoy it, or rate and review the show where applicable. It's a no-cost way to support the show and the incredible guests that have been so gracious with their time and their stories and their expertise. Now, each of my honored guests were very carefully chosen. Yes, their stories and lives are incredibly interesting, and tales of resilience and wonder and overcoming difficulty and beautiful insights. Within each episode, I have buried inside some tools that you can use on a road of self-discovery, which, as we hopefully are all on as we are alive, I am of the opinion that we should always be striving for evolution. And you might be too, if you're still here. So each episode has built on the last, and for what is to come in 2025, I believe we will need these tools more than ever. Without further ado, my first guest, Jeremiah Brent, a celebrated interior designer, TV personality, and author, starting with his own personal alchemy.
The truth is I do. I see beauty in everything. I see beauty in conflict. I see beauty in strife. I see beauty in, you name it. I can always find something beautiful, or I can see a way to transform it. It's what I love to do. It's, we've talked about this before, but I love what I do. Like, I absolutely love it. To be able to work through and in your passion is the ultimate gift. You know what I mean? And obviously, as you know, it's changed. As your life and your career change, your business changes, the process changes, but the passion has never changed. And I appreciate you saying that, because that's my biggest challenge, even with whether I'm designing product or whether we're working on a project. I really want to find the beauty in something and give people access to that beauty. Yeah, that's the best part.
Yeah. I mean, I can see that in your work. I remember when we shot one of your offices, it was like midtown, nasty commercial building. And you initially wanted Nate to move up there. And he was like, no. And then you went in and made it this like incredible safe haven. And then he was like, actually, I'll take it.
I know. What an asshole.
But that's only just a testament of your gifts. It's like, wow, you saw the potential, yeah, and you were able to make it happen. I mean, that's the thing. I think a lot of times people, they're able to dream big, but they don't actually do the things, and they're not able to like actually make it happen. And you have done both, and I think that stems from that skill that your mom, when she was, raising you, I think that really absolutely impacted. My second guest, acclaimed interior designer, Nozawa, who has such vibrance and is a beacon of light. Take it away, Noz.
There are so many of us who feel inside like we don't make sense, and we're just sort of doing the things in order to live in society. And if the work that I do and the way that I speak about it and the way that I exist on this planet helps other people feel less alone, because we might not all come together as a community of strangelings, but within each of our own communities, to find peace in knowing that like we might be the one satellite that kind of like beacons up to this like grouping of aliens who orbit. That feels really powerful, and it gives me a lot of motivation to continue to do this until they won't let me no more.
Next, we are joined by my favorite cosmic camp counselors, two of the world's leading astrologers, Ophira and Tali Edut, of the AstroTwins and Elle Magazine's resident astrology columnist. What would you hope for your legacy, and what would you say your siren song is? And we'll have both of you answer.
I think for me, I would say it's inclusivity. I really want people to like see what a world looks like where we include each other and we look around and say, this person might feel like a misfit. Why don't I invite them in instead of letting them sit there on their own and feel weird and awkward, or just like, why don't I include another perspective or another type of person, another gender in the mix? Like, just if people can see that modeled, then because I do think people want to be that way at the heart, but they don't know a lot of times how, or they've been hurt or traumatized by someone from a different social group. So they then develop these defenses. But I think there's room to move so far beyond that. And I think we all feel like are most connected to our souls when we're connected to soul family as a concept.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Ophi, what about you?
Yeah. For me, it's being resourceful because I think we all have the ability to tap into, we don't all have equal resources by any stretch of the imagination, but we have a lot more than we think we do. And you can see that there are people that make a whole lot out of a whole lot less. You don't have to have your family's name etched into the side of a building to create something great in this world. You just, and people and friendships and relationships are resources too. So all the more reason to be inclusive, welcoming, bring on the camp counselor vibe. Camp was a big part of our lives. Our mom being the Girl Scout leader, we started going camping in like second grade, I think. And it was just such a magical week that we'd look for. We went winter camping, we went summer camping. And in those moments, we had to be resourceful. We had to build fires. We had to figure out how to entertain ourselves sledding down the hill outside of this wood cabin. We had to make fun wherever we went out of nothing. And maybe that's a Gen X thing, but
it's a rat thing too.
It's a rat thing. And I think it's in every human, to be that way. Like maybe we have too many tech toys and our muscles are atrophying as a culture, but that doesn't mean it's not within us. So it just feels good that tapping into that resourcefulness and creativity. So that's mine.
You see a garbage can lid, I see a sled.
Now, we are joined by a neuroscientist, educator, and leadership coach, where we talk all things about the brain. Irene Salter brings us ways we can work with the brain rather than against it. This is one of my favorite clips from Irene's episode.
It's a study in which they put somebody into an MRI machine, and they basically said, here's a whole bunch of images, and some of them were labeled computer because they were told that this was computer generated, that some other experimenter in the research group used Photoshop to kind of create these modern art pieces. And then a bunch of other ones were gallery, coming from a prestigious gallery in Amsterdam. And so they would put people in a brain scanner and say, okay, like, which ones do you find more beautiful? And you'd see the picture and you'd see if it was computer or if it was gallery. And people would rate the painting. And then they would look at their brains and see, did the medial orbital frontal cortex light up or not? And probably unsurprisingly, the ones that were from the gallery, everyone was like, wow, those are beautiful. And they had a much higher beauty response and a much higher activity in that one brain area than when it was labeled computer. But all of the paintings were from the gallery.
They tricked them.
They just did it. I know, of course. Psychology researchers, that's what they do, right? And all the paintings were from the gallery, but it's the framing of the painting that matters in our mind. And so when you see gallery, you're bringing up, again, certain memories, certain emotions, certain sensory experiences that come from gallery experiences. It elevates the art. So that's why music that you hear inside of a concert theater has a greater impact than what's coming out of your stereo. It's also why when you have a portrait inside of a frame and it's hanging on a wall, it's different than a pile of snapshots or like, flipping through pictures on your phone. You have just a very different experience of it because it's elevated, and that elevation allows you to slow down and be more present with it. But that doesn't mean that you can't take a photo on your phone and elevate it in a certain way. Or the music on your stereo, if you close your eyes and imagine that you're hearing it in a different setting, can bring it to almost the same levels of beauty. You just have to reframe it intentionally in your mind.
Doesn't Irene make learning science fun? I think she does. All right, next up, let's hear from Nara Lee, the founder and CEO of Deveris, a leading high-touch fertility concierge company and digital platform. I love what she has to say about the elegant perspective of time.
I think the best advice I've received is that hopefully life is long, right? And once you have that perspective, it's much easier to swallow or process whatever that is so large in your life right now. Whether it's a positive thing or a negative thing, I think sometimes it can be really challenging to feel like this isn't like you often feel like this is everything, right? Like this is going to be the make it or break it thing, or this hard moment is going to be the decisive thing. And I think usually, yes, sometimes it is the case that those are the decisive moments, but usually things blend out over time. And once you have that breathing room or that perspective to see that time will tell, things become much easier, or you're able to stay in the game for longer as a result.
Since we talked about time, let's go back to the idea of maybe in another life. Yeah, reincarnation, and how it's never too late to begin a new chapter in your life, even the one you are living now. Michelle Brock shares her insights. One of my very favorite chapters in your book, it was You Are Not Your Story, and it was your experience with the Cherokee medicine woman. I need you to tell that story. It's so good.
Yeah, it was that ends up being a lot of people's favorite story.
It's very
from
relatable.
Because I mean, she was just so awesome. I had gone to Taos, New Mexico, and you mentioned like how you use oracle cards, and I sometimes do that with like a map. So I was like, where should I go? And I pointed to Taos, New Mexico. I'm like, I guess I'm going to Taos. Like I wanted to kind of go away by myself. And, when I got there, I learned of this local medicine woman. They're like, oh, she's the best. She does extractions. Like she uses crystals to kind of like take off negative energy. I'm like, I'm filled with negative energy that needs to be removed, and so I ended up booking a session with her, and she shows up and she was literally just gruff and rude, and I expected her to be like hugs and smiles, and she's spiritual, and she's going to just take me into her arms
love and light.
like love and light.
Yeah.
And she was like, why are you here? And so I go into this whole like, well, I just got a divorce. And she was just like waved her hand in my face and was like, that is a really boring story. And I was like, what? I'm paying this woman to come here and she was like, do you think you're the only one who has a story? And I was kind of like, oh, white lady called out on my like being self-centered kind of thing.
It happens.
It happens. It was important. And I ended up doing this session with her that night. She was like, if you keep telling that story, it's going to keep following you around. Mm-hmm. So she was there to remove my negative energy, but my negative energy was being formed by me, right? And over time, I actually spent like the rest of that week with her. actually.
Amazing.
And I learned a ton from her. And over time, I learned that she was actually really kind. And, she just wasn't what I expected her to be. Right. And so we do this. We kind of like make snap judgments about people based on what we think they should be rather
Yeah.
than who they are. But yeah, that's a great, I think that's chapter 8.
Yeah.
There's more details in the story. I won't spoil them all, but that's actually, it's just one of those moments where I was like, this is not how it went in my head.
And let's not forget the episode in honor of my 40th birthday, where I bring on 2 of my best friends, April and Laura, where we discuss leaving the Mormon church, also known as the LDS church, what the gift of rebuilding our worldviews from scratch gave us. And first, we're going to hear from April.
My mom once said something about how like, oh, well, like if you're not Mormon, if you're not Christian, like why would you do good things to anyone? Like what's your
purpose
there's
of morality?
why do good things? Why choose good things? And I was like, well, that seems insane to me. Like obviously like there are lots of reasons to do to be kind to each other, lots of reasons to be good to each other, and a lot of reasons that churches will tell you not to be good to each other. So I thought that was just like kind of a crazy idea, but also something that I never had to think about whether I wanted to be kind to people, but thinking about like, what my relationships were going to be like, what my relationship with things like, substances, and what my relationship, I really had no clue whatsoever, like what dating was going to be like for me. Like it wasn't something I was good at before when I was Mormon, but it's like something that when I left, I was like, I have absolutely zero clue what I believe in terms of like what goes on in dating relationships. And it was scary, and it was confusing and very strange, and something that I took a very long time to kind of figure out.
Thank you, April. Okay, Laura, take it home, babe.
Yeah, I feel like the humanity of people more now, ever so much more than I ever did before. And maybe it's just because we no longer have that barrier anymore. And it's like just seeing people for who they are versus like through some sort of like belief system is a very different experience.
Now, William Lee, founder of Armature Projects, he's also a contributing editor to El Decor in Town and Country. His episode, The Joyful Art of the Pivot, is something that I often think about.
Bad experiences, when you're sort of going through them, feels awful. But if you can take a step back from them and think about all the things you're learning and all the things you're gaining by going through this, and then sort of knowing when to sort of leverage that and remember that later, I mean, that's really, really important. And I think that, we've talked a little bit about how I sort of look at life now. And when something bad happens, I think instead of thinking, oh, that sucks, I think, what a joy. And, understanding that even bad things you can learn from them. And, what a joy it is. I'll give you an example. So,
please.
And this is not a devastating example at all, but this is an example of just like every day, like what a joy. Okay. So as you know, I'm a big gardener, and, every year my dahlias are spectacular. And, I look forward to the end of the summer when they come out and they're huge and they're like, wow. Everyone's having a bad dahlia season. Everyone. It's like, I don't know what it is, but they're not really coming out. And the other day, I was really annoyed at the garden. And I thought, what did I do wrong? What is wrong? Like, why are these dahlias not coming out? And I started getting mad and like upset that I wouldn't see these beautiful flowers. And then I just took a step back and I said, but what a joy to even have a garden. What a joy to just get these few dahlias that have come out. And what a joy it's going to be to figure out what was it about this season that made these dahlias not come out. So it's really, I mean, that's a that's a very kind of non-dramatic example of what a joy, but it is
It's
kind
a
of
good
how
one, though.
it's how I choose to live my life now. It's like, instead of just being, oh, that sucks, it'd be like, okay, what a joy that I got to experience this and then kind of figure it out.
Yeah, like the art of the pivot. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right, next up, let's hear from my favorite nose, aromatic designer and founder of Bioalchemy Olfactive, Michelle Gagnon.
We need a revolution in how the world experiences scent. And you know I feel this way. It's
Well, honey, why do you think I asked the question?
Of course. I think we've all learned a big lesson about the power of scent after COVID. With so many of us experiencing anosmia, paranosmia, lack of smell, or disoriented interpretation of scent, and how that felt, right? I mean, scent is, like I had said, it's so powerful, it's so primordial. And even as it connects to the pleasures of life, I mean, beyond, right, the effect that it has on the brain and the body and how we can use this as real, true, like intranasal medication, think about like compounds and constituents that we inhale is like an intranasal medication. So people are like, well, how does this work, right? How can you smell something that affects the body? You can go to the pharmacy right now and buy intranasal medications that will have an effect on you because it's immediate, it's right to the brain. And a lot of medicines today are made through the natural medicines of plants and the understanding of them. But I think that scent is something that allows us to experience some of the greatest pleasures of life. I mean, even when we eat, 85% of what we're tasting, we're actually smelling. Herb, like herbal or floral, this is not a flavor. This is an aromatic profile. We mistakenly describe what is fragrance as flavor. There's are studies that show that a lack of smell or anosmia, no smell, leads to depression, loss of sexual appetite. And I know that even when I had COVID, I experienced anosmia for around 2 weeks, and I would be cooking something, I would forget, and it would be burning on the stove, and so it's also this like alert, you know. I mean, our sense of smell is there to help us navigate, but I think that more importantly, when we start to smell quality aromatics, which are really difficult to find, truly, or when we stop and smell the roses, you know, it's that moment of just enjoying something so beautiful, so real, something that we truly can communicate with and engage with on an intimate level. And it's a moment to just, I think, like nourish ourselves and slow down time a little bit. And I think we take these things for granted. But I think that scent is, it could be a powerful portal, and it has been used for thousands of years in meditation practices and rituals, in all these different divine, you know, ceremonies and in spiritual practices, and because we've always been aware of the power of scent. It's just unfortunate that I think in today's time, our sensibility to, you know, and our access to quality scent has lessened and sort of been numbed, I think, by a lot of the synthetic scents that we're so exposed to.
Now, this heavy hitter from Kathe Crawford, she's an author, speaker, and life coach, and her wisdom from her fourth quarter of life, freeing herself from the secrets she carried and the importance of having an open heart.
My passion is truth telling and bringing out the best and inspiring. You know, what my purpose now and how I'm doing that is by mentoring. You know, I love sharing the wisdom that I've learned along the way, and I had so wished that I had had that. And I do know that as another podcast, you know, I had gotten a lot of that from my grandmother, from this wise elder, and I'm really in tune now to being a modern elder and sharing what I know. If I can take my wisdom and marry it with youth and with that that, you know, when you're young, like everything is possible, right? And I believe that it's such a beautiful marriage of the young and the old, and I believe that in so many other countries, you know, the elders are revered. And I never Thought I'd be old. Don't think I'm old in the way I'm referring to it, but I am. And I've lived a lifetime. And my legacy that I want to leave behind is to speak your truth. Even if your voice shakes, you got to do it. You've got to say it. So that's...
Which leads us to Asha Frost, an Indigenous medicine woman, international bestselling author, and speaker whose insights I turn to regularly. Her calm, quiet presence is incredibly powerful, and I know you can learn from her.
I think that we are in a very individualistic society, and we forget that we're in community, and the way we're going to move forward is through that community energy and through relating to one another. So I think what we're seeing now on social media is a lack of that, a lack of relating heart to heart, spirit to spirit. Yes, we need to share the truth. Yes, we need to speak up, all of those things. But then what? Then when it all falls, how are we going to relate to one another? And so I do believe creation teaches us that, how the bees relate to the flowers and the plants relate to the sun, and everything, all of creation does relate to one another. How can we learn from that? How can we look outside and say, oh my goodness, if they were in a fight right now, or if they had opposing viewpoints, what would happen, right? How could they relate with one another? You know, how would the wind move through the trees? Like, I think about that a lot. And I think that it's a lesson and a teaching needed right now, because there's so much division and there's so much, I'm right, you're wrong, binary thinking, black and white. I love the option of a third way, or just a different, opening up and expanding our viewpoints to allow others to rest in our hearts as well and contemplate those. With regards to the moons, my book is based on the 13 moons, and we have 13 moon cycles in our calendar year, or Gregorian calendar, and that 13 moon got snuffed out by colonization. I'd heard that it was a Mi'kmaq elder that shared that the 13 moon got erased because it was actually a woman's moon. So I think that's interesting. That powerful woman's moon got erased, and then we went to this 12 moon calendar year. So bringing back the 13 moons is really important. And when I wrote it, there's specific Ojibwe teachings around each of those moons that would be relevant to where I live or my ancestors live. Now, of course, we know Indigenous people are not a monolith. So across Turtle Island, there are many different traditions, ways of being and knowing and celebrating. And I wrote this book for everyone, hoping or inviting people, may my words and my teachings activate your own. May we relate to one another. Again, relationship being, how can you relate to these teachings, and what does that remind you of? How can you remember in your own way the wisdom that's in your cells and your bones? So those 13 moons came out as teachers almost, and as invitations to your own wisdom and bringing that forward. And then the animal beings, I would ask, which animal wants to be related to this moon? Those weren't handed down. Those weren't taught. Those were from spirit. I asked what wanted to come forward. And those animal spirits came forward again as wisdom keepers and as beings that are going to share all of this beauty, I think, with the world. So that's how that book came together.
And now, Broadway, baby. Kiara Brown Clark, who hails from Disney Theatrical Group and is a Tony Award-nominated producer for Cabaret at the Kit Kat Club. What's the Disney polish? This is something that you coined, right?
Yes. It's a phrase I coined. I don't even know when in space or time I did, but it just came about because there's something about, and I've learned this along the way working for the company for so long in different capacities, you know, even when I was assisting in company management over at the Lion King at one point. And this was like right as we were coming out of the pandemic and COVID. I remember saying to someone, you know, I really pride myself on the Disney polish. And what that means to me is that you come being your best self, even if you are having the worst day ever. The minute you enter that door, that stage door, the front doors of the theater, the front doors of your office, just like put your best foot forward if you can. I know it can't happen every day. No one is perfect, but I'm also not asking for perfection, right? Because what is perfection in the world? I'm asking for you to put your best foot forward and let your inner energy shine, but also have like some class and grace. I always say, I'm like, yeah, you can take me to a good old Irish bar, or you can put me at a table in the White House. Like, I want a little bit of both. It's that synergy that to me makes a Disney polish. And that's what guests also expect, like in hospitality, but also, right, working for Disney. That name comes with a lot of weight, but I feel like so does an individual's name or someone representing any company. So, why not? We live our lives day in and day out. We work so hard. Be the best that you can be all the time if you can, if you're up to it. I say, why not? Life is short. So that's
I
the
love
Disney
that.
polish. It's silly, but I love it.
Let's hear from my latest guest, Yolanda Chitohwa. She's a public defender practicing criminal and family defense here in New York. You have to be a really strong person to be able to like put those emotional boundaries. Like what do you say? Like, what could you say about that? Like, how do you do that?
Yeah, that's such a great question, Brittany. I do think you do need to have like thick skin and be really strong to do this job, is particularly my job. But it's okay if you don't, right? Like, it's okay if you don't want to do this because or you can't do it because it is very difficult. And I would never recommend someone who's like burning out to stick it out. Just because generally like people who practice law like have, a higher chances of like being addicted to substances or, having mental health issues. So I think it's like when you're at the point where you're like, I cannot do this anymore, I think the strength in that is stopping. Because it is really difficult. And it's taken me a few years. I've been practicing criminal and family defense for almost 6 years. And it is, some days are really hard. Like there was a day just very recently where I was in court on the record in front of the judge with my client next to me. My client is weeping. I'm weeping, like just crying uncontrollably. And my supervisor had to step in and just handle it for me because I couldn't do it. I hadn't cried at work in a long time. So as hard as that was for me, it helped me know that I still have a heart in this and that I'm still very passionate about it because it's very easy to get jaded. But I think that's the way that your mind and heart is protecting yourself from the difficulties that we see in this job. Because we're up against the state of New York. Every time we're defending one of our clients, we're up against the entire state of New York and all of their resources. And as wonderful as my office is and as many resources as we have, sometimes there's only so much you can do. So on that particular day, it was truly such a blessing because I'm a big Peloton girly. And I happened to have a live studio Peloton class scheduled for that evening. So, I came home at lunch and my supervisor thought I was joking when I said I'm going home. But she called me to check in and she's like, where are you? I'm like, I'm at home. I told you I'm coming home. I'm done for today. But I had a class later at 5:30 and that just, it just was so amazing and if you've ever been to a Peloton live class, like the energy that's in there and like everyone is so kind. Everyone is so smiley and happy to be there and so welcoming. And it was just such a beautiful place to be in that really helped me that day. Like I needed that more than I realized that day. And also just like exercising like scientifically, like, is good for you. So I think a lot of it is just about finding that balance in your life, learning how to compartmentalize work from home and finding things at home that make you feel happy. Like, we were talking that I worked out this morning. I try to work out before work because if I don't, then I likely won't do it. But it helps put myself in like a mindset for the rest of the day. I'm really trying to get into meditating. I'm struggling, so my mind is always racing. But just like finding things that bring you joy. And I try not to talk about work as much as I can when I'm not at work because I think that's a really easy way to burn out if like all day long I'm talking about work and then in the evening and weekends I'm talking about work. So I try to separate that a lot. But like I said, I was like, you don't want to get too jaded, which I get like, because I have gotten better. Like I used to cry daily and now it's maybe once every few months. But I've had several, more senior attorneys and supervisors tell me that, the day that you stop being nervous or the day that you stop like really caring about this job is the day that you need to stop doing this job. Because I think you still need to have that level of compassion for what you're doing and for your clients and I guess find that balance between having that compassion and protecting yourself as well. Because I think if you protect yourself and you still want to be an effective lawyer for your clients at the end of the day.
Wow. What a wild ride, right? I hope you've enjoyed this reflection on the time that we've shared together this year. I have so much gratitude for all the lovely humans, all that I can call friends, and I feel so lucky to know them and to learn from them. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. Their stories have touched my heart and my life, and I hope you have picked up some things that you can hold in your heart too. That's a wrap for 2024. Thank you for spending this time with us. I'd also like to give a special thanks to my producer, Juan, who, without his calm presence, his solid advice, and truly excellent production abilities, this show would not be what it is today. Thank you, truly. We will be taking the next few weeks off to recharge. We're wishing you all a magical holiday season, and I hope you'll join us when we return in January. But before we go, I'd like to read a lovely review by Kong is the Best Boy, entitled Vulnerable and Refreshing. I really enjoyed the conversations with people who you don't usually see making appearances on pods. They are very insightful and make me see the world a little differently. For people interested in design, the designers are definitely interesting. For everyone else, the conversations on making big life changes are delightful. Well, I am so thrilled to hear. Thank you, Kong is the Best Boy. If you feel so inclined, I'd love to hear from you, dear listener. Drop me a line via the chat form on my website. I'm going to be doing an Ask Me Anything episode in the new year, and I'd love to have some of your questions. You can find my website at brittanyambridge.com, and my socials are my name, Brittany Ambridge, across the board. If you would like to leave a rating and review, I'd love to hear that as well. For our credits, we've got podcast cover art and identity by Stephanie Brookler, which she's amazing. And then my producer, big thanks to my producer, Juan Paulini Diaz. Happy holidays from all of us at Beyond the Portrait. And yes, that includes my fur baby Margot and Juan's little dog, who's also a little piglet, baby Bayota. Happy holidays.